I'm drawing here from the urban geographer Paul Wheatley, who says this about the situation, the historical situation that we're living at the end of the color line century, at the end of the millennium. He says that we are experiencing in your lifetime a revolution in the nature of social organization on this planet. He says we're living at a culminating period in the history of the city, at a time when we can confidently anticipate the conclusion of two cycles in the process of urbanization. The first is that which took its origin some 5,000 years ago with the so-called, but somewhat inappropriately named, urban revolution. The second constitutes an epicycle of this secular process, which was initiated as recently as the 18th century, when the emergence of modern industrial technology began to exacerbate inequalities in the incidence of urbanism among the world's population. Now, when the rate of urbanization in industrial communities is tending to decline, at the same time as it is accelerating in the most underdeveloped countries, we're approaching a time when not only will all men and women live in terms of the city, but urban dwellers will again be distributed more or less in accordance with regional population densities. It seems inevitable that by the end of the 21st century, a universal city, Ecumenopolis, will have come to comprise a worldwide network of hierarchically ordered urban forms enclosing only such tracts of rural landscape as necessary for man's survival. Now, what Wheatley is saying here, what I want to emphasize very quickly, is that when you come to talk about notions like ethnicity and color and race, obviously, as we all know, class is very important. But maybe we don't know how important and how deeply entrenched we are in these notions of class. Because what urban geographers have shown is that when cities were created 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in these 7 areas of primary urban generation, which are all now what we call the third world, what happened was that social stratification became a permanent, enduring part of all human societies where there was wealth that was concentrated in major places. Social stratification is the nature of the world we live in. So if we're going to talk about equality and we're going to talk about democracy, we've got to realize that the nature of the beast in which we live and have lived for all this time is socially stratified. And it's those social stratifications, Wheatley says, that are fundamental to all of these future arrangements. But he says what is happening now at the end of this century and into the next century is that the nature of the urban world is changing radically. We call it globalization. He says what it really is an ecumenopolis. Cities around the world are going to be interrelated with such speed and intensity of exchanges of diseases, of ideas, of wealth, that you have hierarchically related cities, cities that are on some sort of hierarchical relationship, and that you're going to live in the context of those magnificent but very powerful interchanges of these different cities. The hierarchies in the cities will not be stable, but hierarchy itself, as long as you've got cities, is going to be there. There are reverberations across these cities. Mandela in Johannesburg influences me in Princeton. The stock market in Asian cities influences you in Boston. Diseases in Hong Kong, they always like to name them after Hong Kong, influence everybody. And how the Oklahoma bombings scare me in my town. Steve Biko runs through my dreams. The Zapatistas and their masks stimulate me to imagine a world with them. Even though these people are not all from cities, it's the Ecumenopolis which hooks us up. Just yesterday, I got a note on my email from a colleague of mine in Chiapas, just to bring you the news. This is what he had to say about what's happening in Chiapas. He said, "En cambio, la situación política de México marcha cada vez peor. Tememos que se esté fraguando una campaña de violencia en contra del EZLN. La propaganda y los enredos que hace el gobierno son cada vez peores. Y lo más grave es que la opinión pública generalizada empieza a creerle. Todo está muy peligroso." He's saying the political situation in Mexico is getting worse and worse. We are afraid that the government is inflaming a campaign of violence against the Zapatistas. The propaganda and the entanglements that the government has made are getting worse and worse. And the worst thing of all is that the public opinion, the general public opinion, has begun to believe this. Everything is very dangerous. And you all know how the dangers in suddenly this little place in Chiapas have suddenly caught the imagination of so many of us.